My name is Jason Eisener, and I'm a filmmaker. I'm a co-creator of the television series Dark Side of the Ring, and I make films like Hobo with a Shotgun and Kids vs. Aliens. And I am here with the legendary comic book creator Ken Landgraf, who created such comics as Starfighters, Rock Warriors, Night Slayers, which I love, and the infamous, super powerful New York City Outlaws. Ken, how's it going? How you doing?
Doing great. The book being reprinted.
Yeah, this is so crazy. Floating World Comics, teaming up with Power Comics to re-release the 5 issues you made in a trade paperback. It looks so beautiful. And, I think you made this comic in 1984, which was like 40 years ago. That's like as about as old as I am. How does it feel like, all these years later for, it to be kind of rediscovered in this way?
Well, obviously I'm honored. You only have any kind of fame because of the fans. Just like I worshiped all the comic book artists. I'm glad that I'm being recognized, and I'm glad younger people are looking at it, because a lot of my fans have died off by now.
Yeah, it seems like there's been with the folks at like Cartoonist Kayfabe and the guys at Power Comics, like they've been like kind of bringing light to some of these DIY comics that were like made in the 80s. So yeah, it's like, it's cool that, of course they had to zone in on you because, your work is, some of the best. But it must be cool to see like a new kind of audience, getting into this.
It's actually hard to believe. It's like somebody having a hit record in the 1960s or 70s. And then years later, after touring and working and grinding away, you get recognition for something that you did in the past.
Yeah, that's so cool. I guess like I want to kind of go back, a little bit just to get some of like your upbringing. Like, when did you like first discover your love for comic books, and like what were those comic books that were catching your eye as a kid?
I liked all the war comic books. There were shows on TV at the time like Combat that I used to watch. There was this big war craze on TV, just like we had American Westerns for years. So there was The Gallant Men, there was 12 O'Clock High. And also all of our parents had fought in World War II, either against the Japanese or the Germans, including my father. So the comics, I was buying like Lois Lane because I liked the artwork. I was buying Superman, Batman. But I like the war comics, especially drawn by Russ Heath and Sam Glansman and Joe Kubert. One of my favorite comic books was Kona, Monarch of Monster Exile. Dell Comics put that out. And if you look that up, a lot of my influences are in there. My inking style is in there, besides Wallace Wood and everything. And also it featured like sharks and monsters and outer space aliens.
Yeah.
It was like pretty much a blueprint for what I would do later. And of course, I had the Mad paperbacks, so I got to see the EC artwork of Wally Wood and Jack Davis and all the other Mad magazine artists. So that was great. So those are big influences.
How old would you say you were when you were first like getting comics, and like how did you get them?
Well, you had to buy them.
Were you like, did you do like little jobs as a kid to afford them, or get your parents to help buy them?
I would get an allowance. And I also started publishing when I was around maybe 14. I had a Spirit duplicator machine. So I made my own comic books and sold them through the Rocket Blast Comic Collectors magazine. What that was they'd have ads in Marvel and DC. And it would say, if you're a comic collector and want to buy back issues, get this Rocket Blast Comic Collector. They came out of Florida. So they would list fanzines in there that you could buy. So I started submitting to all the fanzines, and then I started putting my own out, including the Crown Stopper Monthly, which never came out monthly, had a Steve Ditko cover that he actually personally drew for me. He was also giving me art lessons through the mail. I kept the letters. They've all been sold, but I'm going to post those at some point on YouTube so everybody can see them.
Yeah, so when you were young, you were like reaching out to comic book artists. Yeah. Like I think I read that like you had like even a fan letter in one of the Spider-Man comics.
Yeah, at Spider-Man #10 with Dr. Octopus, and I also had letters in Adventure Comics because I would write things like what happens to Congo Bill when he goes to sleep because he turns into a gorilla. I said, why doesn't a lion come and eat him? So they would print that stuff. And almost every time I sent the letter, I had it printed. I must have had maybe 5 of them printed. And one of the tricks was to write on the postcard in color inks. So they noticed it right off. That's how I got noticed.
Wow.
And I got in touch with Ditko because of that letter was printed, and they gave me Ditko's address.
Really?
Yeah, or they sent the letter to him with my comments. And then from there on, he started telling me what to do, like how to lay out a page and stuff, or how to construct a figure, reconstruct it, how to draw hands. And there was no schools at the time, so unless you knew a professional artist, there was no way you're going to be a comic book artist. You know, nobody saw the pencil work, for instance.
Wow.
Saw what a pencil page looked like when I came to New York City, and the first pencil page I saw was Gil Kane that Marie Sever gave me a photocopy of a Sergeant Fury cover. Like, so I had to get good real fast. Let's put it that way. I thought I was like a genius because everybody was saying how great I was. You come to New York, you're like nobody.
Like as a kid, like you know, I can only imagine, you know, the days of the internet and all that stuff. Like, how could that become a dream for you? Who did you see like doing it, and you thought you wanted to model your like own path kind of after?
I didn't see anybody.
Yeah,
school teachers had no idea how a comic was drawn. They said, I think it's done with an etching tool. Okay, because these guys came from fine art backgrounds. They were teaching the drawing classes. So I was like always kind of weird, you know, the things I was being attracted to. And I even went to a guidance counselor, and I told him I want to be a comic artist and I can't help you.
I had the same thing with film when I was in school.
It's the same thing. It's impossible.
Yeah.
To do that.
That's what I really admire, your like, you know, your hustle as a kid to reach out to these guys and like try and get advice or just some like inspiration. I used to do the same as a kid and like try and write filmmakers and sneak on sets, you know, and like I often wonder, is that like, do kids do that today? Are they?
I don't know if they can do that today. It was a different time. I actually went up to Stan Lee on the street at Marvel Comics. He came out of the building. I was actually waiting for somebody to come out of the building because I was nobody yet. I had my portfolio with me, and I went right up to him and said, "Are you Stan Lee?" And he said, "Yes." And then I told him I just got out of the military, Vietnam, and I want to draw comic books. Can I show you my work? And he said, "I'm going to lunch now, but go up to Marvel and talk to John Romita." And then Romita tore it all apart, obviously. And then he sent me over to Marie Sever, and she just liked me, so she started giving me photocopies. And She said, anytime you do new work, you come up to Marvel, just tell the secretary you're here to see Marie. I must have did that maybe 20 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Did any work come out of that, or was it just you were?
I wasn't even good enough yet. I wasn't even good enough to work for Screw Magazine yet because I couldn't ink good enough. I couldn't work for High Times. I would work for all these things later. I worked for anything. I worked for religious things.
Wow.
I also was doing like bondage samples to show Eric Statton, which was funny.
Yeah.
I had been influenced as a kid by the Mars Attack cards.
Okay? Oh my God.
I had those. So I loved all the war and Civil War news. I don't know if you saw that. You should look it up on eBay.
Yeah.
Guys falling off the horse and spikes coming through their chest, blood all over the place.
Wow.
So then I saw when I went shopping with my mom at the grocery stores, they would have the men's adventure magazines. I couldn't buy them because I was maybe 10, 8 or something. But I knew that those were drawn by the same guys that did Mars Attacks. They had that same lurid color print, which I used all the time myself. The New York City Outlaw covers were all painted like that.
Yeah. What did your parents think of all this? Like when you were growing up, what did they think of the comic books? And then what did they think of you, you know, trying to become a comic book artist?
I think they thought it was impossible. They didn't really pay attention to it. My dad drew a little bit, and so I was influenced by that. And I was also influenced by all the martyrdoms of the saints. That appealed to me. I used to save my money and buy the Lives of the Saint pamphlets just to see how they were killed or something.
Did you have friends when you were kids? When you were a kid that were also into comics?
Only a few of them, and some of them were cool, and some of them were real squares. You know, nerds. They seemed to be divided. Like one was a rock drummer, because I had bands at the time also. I was actually making a living at 16, 15 playing bars, because before disco records came out.
Whoa.
So I would switch bands all the time. Like one guy, L's bar, his kid, L Jr., was a drummer, So I joined his band. We played there every single night when I was like 14 years old.
What were you playing?
Organ.
Oh, wow.
By the Animals, like House of the Rising Sun, and then later The Doors.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned like the military, like, and I know you spent a couple of years serving in Vietnam. Like at that time, like how were comic books like serving you at that time? Like, was that part of your life during that time?
Yes, it was, because when we were in Vietnam, we were in San Francisco, and that was during the hippie time. So I got the Dirty Underground comics with Crumb's artwork, which is S. Clay Wilson was a former Korean medic. He was no hippie.
Yeah,
he was doing like Captain Piscums and the Something Pirates, and he drew lesbian pirates, and it's crazy. Then when we were overseas, we would go to the Philippine Islands, and you could buy the overseas weekly newspaper, and guess who was in there? Wally Wood.
Whoa.
Drawing Sally Forth naked. So he was being influenced by the underground comics.
At that time, were you also still continuing to write other comic book artists?
Yes, as I got letters from Deanne Wilson, the cartoonist from Playboy. Will Elder sent me a drawing of Annie Fanning, which I had sold through in the past. And I showed that on the ship I was on. Everybody freaked out. How to get an original drawing of Annie Fanning?
That, like, how would you say, like, that time you served there, like, would, like, inform your work, or, like, would it become part of inspiration to your work?
Okay, first of all, I didn't have to kill anybody because I wasn't a soldier. I was in the Navy, and I got rated as a second-class petty officer, so I didn't have to do deck work. I didn't have to go and carry body bags, because that's what we did. We took all the dead soldiers and put them in. They were in body bags already.
Wow.
Put them in the whole ship after we unloaded napalm and all this like crazy, like almost Nazi stuff with death heads on it.
Wow.
And missiles. I wasn't a gunner, so I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So other guys were doing that. So the whole ship would be, after we fired everything into Vietnam, they'd load bodies, bring them back to San Francisco, and ship them back to the parents, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went one time on a mail run, because I was friends with I'm always friends with the mailmen, even right now, because I like mailmen. They're weird. They were like very individualized. So I went on a helicopter there, and when I landed, those giant helicopters were coming with all the soldiers all bloodied and beat up and wounded. So I saw all that. So that made a big impression. It looks so realistic. I couldn't even relate to it being real.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
After your time there on the GI Bill, you went and to an art school. Out of that, like, how was that experience, and like, how did you find going to school for art?
First of all, I wasn't a baby. These kids were like from rich families. His mom and dad paid for them to go to school. Okay, I was in combat situations.
Yeah,
I was trained by Marines. I knew how to fight. I actually knew how to like stop somebody in the tracks at the time. Now I'd run from them. But at the time, I knew how to hit them in the neck or hit their, push them back like that, and then give them a karate chop, all that kind of stuff. So when I went, I had a GI Bill, but I also won a scholarship to SVA, School of Visual Arts, that was funded by Bert Hogarth. My first disappointment was Hogarth wasn't there. He had left the school years ago, and Silas Rhodes was running it. So what I did is they had classes there with Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman, but I was a first-year student. Because I had been in the military and trained in all sorts of stuff, I went up to the principal of the school, Rhodes, and I said, look, if I can get permission from Kurtzman and Eisner, can I go in their classes, second-year classes and third year? You weren't supposed to be in there. I was supposed to take, 101 photography.
Right.
So they signed off on me. So I got in the classes. I wasn't going to waste any time. Other guys had gotten into New York because they weren't drafted. And they were already working in the comics. They were only like 2 or 3 years ahead of me.
Wow.
In fact, Kubert even, he told me when I met him, even though I had written to him, he offered me a scholarship at his school. Wow. I was a veteran. Someone let me attend his classes for absolutely free.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that interaction was like with Eisner when you like met him and showed him your work?
Both of them were real killers. These were serious men. You know what I mean? They weren't like gonna like look at your work and go, oh, that's nice. Like all the other teachers, wanted to offend you because you're too lame and weak.
Yeah.
So they treated you like a boot camp. He brought in pages. Eisner took his tracing paper, one of your layout, and fixed it and told me, here, you should do a zoom. I didn't even know about these techniques yet.
Wow.
Kurtzman was the same. You bring something into Kurtzman, and he would rip the stuff apart in front of the other students. They didn't like that. See, I was used to being slapped around by sergeants and different guys in boot camp. That didn't even faze me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they would cry or something if somebody said, this is wrong, or, so that's what, and then Kurtzman even went so far as to say, what, is Landgraf the only person bringing in pages to be corrected? Because I was.
Wow.
The kids were taking it just as an elective.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to be a comic artist.
Yeah. You were hungry. You were really hungry for it.
I was real hungry. I was comparing myself to Eric Bird and the Animals, and House of Rising Sun, and that organist Alan Price, because they wanted that so bad. That's how I felt. And also, as a child, I used to hear everybody joking around about Van Gogh, how he cut his ear off, and how he died with penniless. I used to get really angry at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I swore I was going to make a living drawing. Even as a child, I had that.
Do you remember?
I had that too. I mean, you don't just go into some insane film directing. What are you, nuts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like it's like I just find so much similarities with your story and my own growing up. And when I would say I wanted to be a filmmaker, and my parents would look at me crazy, and then I had to just and I just had to like get out there and get in front of people and just do whatever I could. Like I would just show up on sets and ask, like, what can I do here?
I learned everything from these guys after a while. Like, what I didn't mention was Gil Kane came as a guest to Harvey Kurtzman's class.
Oh, wow. Yep.
I asked him, how do you draw like Spider-Man's foot coming out towards you? He said it's a 3-point perspective. Nobody ever told me that. It's coming out at the vanishing point. Okay, so when I learned that, I ran after him after the class wasn't even more. I just bolted out of the class and I said, Kane, I want to be your assistant. He said, I see, my boy, that you're very influenced by my work, because I was trying to be like Gil Kane, pencils, Wallywood inks.
Oh,
all kind of tried to do that.
Yeah.
So he said, meet me up at Marvel on Friday, and I'll give you some work to do. So I got into Marvel. I was up there, I was near the Xerox machine. He said, make photocopies of my artwork here. So I have thousands of these layouts that he did in the 1970s.
Wow. But what kind of things would he get you to do as an assistant?
Stupid stuff. He would give me a going on paperback and said, read this. Nobody wants to do that. And he said, make sketches of what the chapters are about. This is like you would break down a screen play. There's parts of it that are slave work and hard work, and you're going to probably fail and start again. So he wanted to skip stages to know what the story was about. So I did that, and then he gave me $50, but I knew he didn't really want to give that to me because he had like a family and kids and all sorts of stuff, and he'd been married a second time. So I said, look, how about I just get to make photocopies of your work? So then he brings in the next week his sketchbooks of anatomy. I copied them all.
Wow.
Photocopies. So the photocopy machine was a brand new thing. There used to be a stat machine. It was a giant machine that could only make the copies. But the new invention was the copy machine, photocopy.
Before we get into Outlaws specifically, I also have to ask, I love how you draw sharks, and it seems like you did a bunch of Shark Attack comics. Yes. Do you have a love for sharks?
First of all, one day in the comic book store, a guy came in the store. He was from Scandinavia. Askold Coleman was his name. He was working for that big conglomerate, Canon Films.
Oh yeah, Canon, yeah.
So he's working for Canon Films, and he said, look, is there anybody here that can draw sharks? I couldn't draw sharks, but I said I could because I had the comics, and I had Sea Devils by Russ Heath, and there were sharks in there.
Yeah.
So I told him I could do it. So the first job I got was Mako, Jaws of Death.
Oh, I know that movie.
Okay, well, it's a great movie in a lot of ways. Real sleazy. So the initial idea of the hand in the water and the shark, the blood behind it, I sketched that out.
Oh, so, wow.
I started drawing that. Then he wanted to see how the shark's going to attack this fat guy. Remember in the pool?
Yeah.
The fat guy.
Oh, yeah.
Shark. So I sketched that out. Then he said, can you work on this Joey Heatherton film, The Happy Hooker Goes to Washington. So I did
Whoa.
art for that.
So you would draw like almost like storyboards as well
Yeah,
too?
storyboards, tight sketches, and then maybe they'd redraw it, but it was the initial ideas that they had to present to somebody. Erie Publications, that was Myra and Foss and those boys. Okay, you know, they're in famous stuff, the Erie Publications that did the horrible covers, like they'd have like somebody on a butcher hook and blood coming out.
I love them.
But okay, first of all, the guy that did those covers was David Alexander, who I worked for later. He painted those covers. He was a black editor.
Wow.
And he also was in charge of Star Publications, which was bondage, so he gave me jobs. That's how I first met him.
Jobs on the side, or?
Well, I met him first, but I didn't know he was the painter of those covers.
Wow. So you grew up in Wisconsin, and what time? Like, what? How old were you when you moved to New York?
That was after the service. I must have been 21 at least.
21.
Maybe a little later.
Wow, and that would have been when, like, in the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember what New York was like in the 70s and 80s?
It's like heaven.
Yeah?
With pornography. As first of all, they had comic book stores, and then they'd have nudist things. Wally Wood was buying those all the time, and he would buy the Betty Page magazines and copy poses for it. And then they had bookstores, used bookstores, which don't even exist anymore. You can go in there, and you get an education. I bought the famous art course from there.
Oh, wow.
So you could go in there and get a book on Michelangelo for, $2 or something, or Tintoretto, the Renaissance artist.
Yeah.
So that would open up your eyes big time. So, and then you go to 42nd Street, you'd see all the Kung Fu movies out.
Yeah.
See, like, I remember Amazons of Wilmore, Battle of the Amazons. They were showing they would have like a little device where you could look at part of the movie trailer inside of the theater.
Oh, cool.
So I said, wow, I didn't have money to go to the theater. I didn't even saw that thing. They always think that the Outlaws came from that, what's that movie that starts with?
The Warriors?
Yeah, I never saw that movie.
To this day, you've never seen it?
No, well, I've seen it to this day, yes.
Okay, yeah.
It was not an influence. I had other influence. Steve Capellonis, who made the first issue of the Outlaws, who I listed as the creator, even though he didn't create the characters. It was going to be called the New York City Champions. I changed it to Outlaws.
Ah.
He had seen that movie. He said, I'm going to do a comic book with guys from all these different bureaus or different nationalities. I threw in a Greek because he was Greek.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, like that's my intro into New York City Outlaws was my friends Evan Husney from Power Comics and Zach Carlson. They had discovered the comic book, gosh, like, I don't know, over 12, 13 years ago. And they showed it to me as if, like, because they knew my favorite movie of all time is The Warriors. And so they were like, if anyone's going to love this, Jason's going to love it. And sure enough, like it did. Like, it's crazy to hear that you weren't like influenced, but I felt that like inspiration. But I was curious, one thing I do really like about the comic book is that like every character, it's very multicultural, and every character has different, backgrounds and ethnicities. Like, so yeah, I was curious, like what had like inspired that.
It was definitely that movie because he was seeing like Rocky and Rambo and all that stuff. Rambo, that was out at the time. Terminator. So he was seeing all these type of things. And he also came up with the storyline because Bob would have never came up with a storyline about a brother being killed by the mob. Bob wrote really crazy stuff later.
Yeah.
Because he was really open-minded and nuts. I mean, he would write really crazy stuff. Because I had worked with him on like a Daily Planet newspaper. We did comic strips in there, and these were like hippie stuff we were working for. Yeah.
I was curious, like how you met with Bob Azar. Like, do you remember your guys' first interaction?
Yes, it was on a Sunday, and the comic book store was closed. I forget which one it was. We were looking in the window, and there was a Neil Adams original. And I had my portfolio with me, and I told he was just standing there looking in the window, and I said, I want to be a comic book artist. He said, well, I want to be a writer. So that's how that started out.
No way. Wow. And then, like, do you remember the initial conversations about New York City Outlaws and what you guys were getting inspired by?
First of all, we were working for the Yipster Times. I had connections with all this underground stuff that I met these people in bars. I'd bring my portfolio in there. So I met Michael Chance. He turned out to be the editor at High Times, so they hired me. I became the first art director on High Times, and I lasted for around 5 issues. I quit because I got busted on a newsstand. I didn't want to deal with that.
They got busted?
Yeah, they got FBI or the cops went after them.
For what?
Uptown Facade. Because it was drugs. It was a pro-marijuana magazine. This was crime at the time. You know?
And you were worried you were going to get associated with it?
Yeah, I really was associated. Tom Facade told me, well, you're probably already in the file system anyways. Ken.
Wow. So were you hiding out for a moment?
I didn't like that drug culture.
Mm-hmm.
All the comic artists were drinkers. They didn't. Maybe they smoked pot later. I know a couple of them that did in the 70s. Okay, but that wasn't the norm because you couldn't control your drawing. I don't know how Crumb worked under LSD. I'd say that's impossible. I never took LSD, but I don't know how he could control his hand.
Wow. Yeah. Do you remember like when you guys sat down to start creating New York City Outlaws? Like, what was that process like? Would like Bob like write a story, an outline for you, or would you guys sit down and start dreaming up ideas of what it could be together?
It was really Bob. We had it all from Steve Capellonis, what the comic was, number one. He was paying for it. That's what I said as a creator. I didn't care about credit at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what it came down to is Bob would just take the ideas and then bring in a script. It was sort of like Marvel. He'd give me an outline a lot of times. I have some photocopies of some of the stuff. And you saw those color things, remember that I gave you?
Yeah, I hold that dearly.
So what he would do is give me like a script. And in one issue, there was a fight scene. Bob shot photographs of him in kung fu poses.
No way.
So how are you going to draw that? You know, all of the Lacey was hardly in there. You couldn't copy like, you know, we had a Bruce Lee movie or something. You know what I mean?
Wow. So, do those photographs still exist?
Oh, because I asked Bob. He said they're probably somewhere, but it was like he shot photos. I basically took the photos and made them look like L. Williamson.
Wow.
Some photos.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Were you guys like working like separately, like through mail or?
Oh, he lived in the city. Bob still had an apartment in New York. He got a rent-controlled apartment early.
Nice.
So he would work in his apartment, and Bob was really streetwise. Like one time, Dave Simons got kicked out of his apartment. Bob went through the window. One time, he wanted some carpets from another room in the when I was his roommates with him for a while, and he went on the fire escape, opened up the window, and took the carpet up and put it in our apartment. It was that. He wasn't like he was trained like he could go in the woods and survive.
Yeah,
you know that guy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
From Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's when I met him, he would like had just come back from some like canoeing trip that sounded so dangerous.
Yeah.
Why did like Steve want to like fund these comics?
He was an entrepreneur. I ate at that restaurant every day. First of all, I got it with all the Greeks at the time. They all come over from Greece in the 1970s and opened up their own restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
I would bring my portfolio, and it wasn't only Steve. I was eating at like 3-4 places like that. They needed lettering. They needed typesetting. They needed somebody to put together their menu. They needed a T-shirt. Nobody knew how to do that. I knew how to do that.
Wow.
I would do a color separation. So I would trade that for food. I went for like maybe 20 years without paying for dinner.
What? That's amazing.
Yes, because I was always doing things. This is before the computer came in. After the computer came in, I was all of a sudden they were printing their lettering.
Right.
You know?
Oh, I'd love to see those old menus.
Yeah, I have some of them.
Oh, cool. That's great. That's so like I always thought one of the most like endearing things, and like I remember Evan and Zach like saying like on the inside of the comic it says "Send to Eva's restaurant," and I always thought that it still exists. That's amazing.
Yes, it's called Eden's Kitchen now. Eden's Kitchen. Yes, on 8th Street where it always was. And we resurrected that restaurant. It was pretty much falling, and it was mostly like guys coming in, and all of a sudden Stevie goes and revamps the whole thing. And you got females showing up again.
So you're going there to eat, and then like how does the conversation of like comic books come up, and then him being like, "Oh, I'll fund one of those comic books."
I showed him Starfighters and Rock Comics. I gave him copies. So
Cool.
he was an entrepreneur. He was only 16, maybe 18 he was.
Oh wow.
To be a manager of a band, so he created a battalion.
Oh, he created that band?
He created a battalion. And we knew Thor because he used to come in there, and I ended up working for Thor.
Yes, yeah. You got those?
All these guys used to come into that restaurant.
Really?
Kiss came in, full makeup, yeah, because Electric Ladyland was across the street. So these guys went. Madonna came in. She even kissed Stevie. I saw her do it.
Whoa.
So yeah, it was pretty weird. It's like to do comics, Eddie wanted to be a band manager of a band.
So yeah, he was quite the entrepreneur, running a restaurant and then trying to do all these little side things as well too. That's amazing. And like the bands that would like come in, like, would you guys spark conversations about comic books at all?
Lisa, they had a big hit record. She had her hair over her eye. That was her trademark. Alex, I forget his name. He was the guitar player. So I got to be friends with him. There were other guys coming in. CC Music Factor came in. I didn't get to know these. They all knew Steve. Tony Hawk, the big skateboarder, came in. I didn't know who the hell he was, but Steve knew who he was. He signed a poster for him.
Wow.
David Byrne used to come in there all the time. We'd get like carrot shakes. Joey Ramone, towards the end of his life, came in there every day.
Whoa.
He had that cancer. So he was in there. Nobody would talk to him or bother him. He'd just come in and order some kind of weird shake, celery juice or something, and drink that.
Obviously, New York City Outlaws is seems heavily influenced by like punk and metal culture. Like, was that something you guys were all into at the time?
Yes, I had a studio with Dave Simons, who became the inker on Howard the Duck, and Armando Gil, who became the Kazar inker. Mm-hmm. This was in New York City. They all stayed in my apartment. I was in charge of pulling in work. I would sketch it out. They would ink it and put zip on it and all that kind of stuff. So I was always hunting up work. So what it came down to is they started getting work later, and so they left. So it was just me. So that's when I started New York City. It was just me drawing in that room by myself.
Like Battalion, I love, that they're the band featured in the comic, and then like on the back of I think it's like issue 2, you see like a big poster of them there. That's pretty amazing. I didn't know that Steve was like involved with that band. Was that something that like he wanted put into the comic, or you guys all felt like this would be cool to incorporate?
It was that he wanted it in the comic, period.
Yeah. I
didn't want to draw all those likenesses.
And it says like there's like a phone number that says call Charlie. Like who's Charlie?
Was in the Pinstripes. That's another band. They're also featured on one of the back covers. They were a new wave type of band.
You can find on YouTube some of the Battalion songs, and there's the New York City They made a song about New York City Outlaws called New York City Outlaws. Do you remember that happening? Like,
oh, because Thor produced that.
Oh, Thor did?
Yes, Thor produced all their records.
Oh, cool.
Their big thing was they did a cover of Foxy Lady, because remember Van Halen did You Really Got Me? That's how those bands broke in, so they did Foxy Lady. Mm-hmm. I don't think anything happened with it, but they put it out. Yeah. It never came out. They were playing like Lemore's East, all those type of places. And then the punks came in.
Yeah.
It was Insanity. Johnny Rotten. I have stuff. I listened to it. I liked all the 60s music, like the Doors and the Animals with House of Rising Sun and all that. But when the punk came in, I liked Johnny Rotten, mm-hmm. and I liked, the Ramones I liked right off. In fact, I had met them once, and I didn't show them my artwork because John Holstrom was already working for him, and I felt like I couldn't. It was unprofessional for me to say, oh, do you want to look at my artwork? The guitar player, not Dee Dee, was Johnny Ramone. He said that they wanted Wallace Wood to draw the cover of their first album, but they contacted Wood, and I don't know if he was drunk or couldn't draw anymore or was messed up physically. He had some assistant do sketches, and they didn't like what he did, so they didn't use Wally Wood. So that I didn't know. I found that out later.
speaking of covers, I love that cover you did for Man of War, Hail to England. Had you done any other album covers?
I was supposed to do the next Man of War cover, but Ken Kelly got it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or a commercial look.
In New York City Outlaws, I think there's like 2 like mini comics about Thor. Do you remember like how that relationship started and like what were those conversations like to get the ball rolling on those stories?
Thor came into the restaurant looking like a superhero. He didn't have that armor on and stuff, but he looked strong. He looked like a god of thunder, and he was with his bandmates, you know, that at the time, with the eye patch. And when Thor came into the restaurant, I already knew who he was because I had that album. I saw it. Like, that's Steve Reeves' Chariot on the cover, by the way.
Yeah. Wow.
Something about the dogs, don't let the dogs come in or whatever that was. So I started talking to him, and then we just hit it off right off. I'm just like a live superhero.
He said he was a superhero.
Well, he said he was, and he also had tried out for a Thor. Stan Lee was going to make him Thor in a TV movie, but it fell through.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, all this stuff happened. He was supposed to be in a Broadway show too called Vicon.
Yeah.
And it was being put together by the manager, Bruce Springsteen. I forget his name right off now, too. They had a meeting up there, I remember, and they were going to do like a Broadway show, but that fell through also.
Did he pitch the idea of like doing a comic?
Yes, he was going to the Boston convention. This is when the Thing came out. Remember that movie, Carpenter?
Oh, love it. Yeah.
Okay. I went with him. He drove up to Boston to go to the comic convention. We made the comic book for the show. And also, we only printed it in 2 colors, black and I think it was red flesh color. And we colored in the stuff by hand with a marker on each cover.
Which comic was that?
That was for Night Slayer, and it was also for the Thor comic.
Oh, cool. Yep.
So we stayed up there, and I slept in the same room with all those guys, and they had a VCR. I'd never seen one in my life, and they were running the Thing all night. I blew my mind. I couldn't believe that movie.
Wow.
One of my favorites.
I can't recall like how long after he would have made that Rock and Roll Nightmare movie. Did you see that?
I worked on it.
Oh, you did?
It as a storyboard artist. Probably did a few things on it.
Do you remember like when you sat down to like design the characters for New York City Outlaws, what any of the inspirations were for them? Like, you know, a lot of them are very like muscular characters. Was it like Bob too that came up with the character, like Thunderclap Jones? You know, it was just so probably my favorite character in the comic book.
Bob came up with all the character ideas and names.
Cool.
So I like created the images, which was basically a Jack Kirby Steranko type thing. And also what I did was it's heavily Wallace Wood. I like that when they made fun of the Wild One, they called it the Wild 1.5 for Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
And Wood drew that. He drew all these leather effects in it with zippers all over the place. So that was an influence.
Wow.
And I liked all the heavy metal stuff. So I really gave those guys a heavy metal look. Real heavy metal.
Yeah.
Bikes. Done that. I haven't seen that ever.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so I put that all in there, and I wanted to make this city look really scary and like you couldn't survive in it, you know. So that was influenced by Bernard Hogarth's Tarzan. He used to draw Tarzan in the jungle in the 1940s, and the jungle looked like it was going to strangle him. That was also influenced on Apocalypse Now, the photographer. If you look it up, he says I based all the scenery on Bernard Hogarth's jungles.
Cool, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, you look up an interview with him. I don't know his name, the cinematographer.
That's amazing. Wow. I love that you took inspiration from like the jungle of, you know, the Amazon and then brought it to like New York. Like at that time, like when I see the movies, like the vigilante films of like that time period in the 70s and 80s, it makes it seem like it's almost like a post-apocalyptic world. Like, did you see that or feel any of that living there and like incorporating any of that into the work?
I sort of did because I knew about all those sleazy places. Not that I was trying to frequent them, but if you ever walked around where movies were being shown, prostitutes would actually come up to you. That was crazy.
Yeah. With New York City Outlaws, one thing I do like a lot is like these people, like I was saying, they're like from the different boroughs and they're like, they have like blue collar jobs. You know, they're not superheroes, almost like ordinary people that are coming together to form this group to help people in the streets, but also major themes about like revenge. The first 2 issues feel like grounded in reality. where it is like heavily about the theme of like revenge. Did you guys have like a structure in mind at the beginning of like where this story would go over 5 issues, or did you kind of go like one story at a time?
It was one story at a time. And Woozar would come up with really inventive ideas, like that one, that backpack full of comics with those weird robots. I mean, who the hell ever drew a comic like that?
So cool.
I mean, it was cool. And then he had that pinball thing where they bounced the pinball off the guy's head.
Mm-hmm.
That should be in the movie. That was insane.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that. I love that moment where Thunderclap Jones takes the guy and puts his head up through the pool table, and they're like playing pool and shooting the balls at his face. That's brilliant.
Well, that was Bob, and it's how I handled it. I tried to draw it like Mad Magazine. You know,
wow. Yeah.
But it came down to was Bob had scripts about stuff that you couldn't swipe from another comic and copy and trace.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be able to draw it because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of that type of stuff. Like I was really hard pressed to how to solve the problem. So I always thought of Harvey Kurtzman when I did that.
That's cool.
Oh,
because those first 2 issues, you know, pretty grounded in a way. It feels like a revenge movie. Almost like I feel like those 2 comic books are like one story. And then when you get to the third one, it's like now the Outlaws are together, and now there's mutants in the sewers and this crazy robot from space. It's almost like Terminator. Where are you going for like inspiration or, you know, to start visualizing that idea?
I would look through my file on robots and I'd look at what Jack Kirby drew.
Oh, yeah.
I think there was a Brainiac character that Gil Kane had drawn to fight Superman, or as a robotic. I look at that. And then I would just kind of make it up from looking at stuff, you know. Somewhat original.
Do you have like an archive of like reference like material that like you just said like you had a robot section to like go to?
Yeah, basically what it came down to is if you didn't have the reference. In fact, Eisner told me you're only as good as your swipe, and if you can't find your reference in 15 minutes, your file's no good.
Gosh, like, you know, being young and trying to create a library of like reference stuff, like where would you, like, other than the library, are you just like, are you buying magazines and like pulling the pages out, or?
I pulled out panels and I would take it and in fact, here's one right now. This is in my file on dogs. Somebody asked for, they wanted to buy a photocopy of it, and you can see here there's all sorts of pictures.
Oh yeah.
There's a whole file just on dogs.
That's great. You know, the action in the comic is like, the staging of it is really good. Like it tracks really well. Like you said, like Bob would send pictures of himself doing some martial arts. Where else would you go to get, would you just go purely to comic books, or were you watching any kung fu movies or action movies to get inspiration?
I only did that for one page, the photos, because it was a specific fight. I don't think he was one of his friends.
The back, I think, of like issue 4, there's like the most incredible like poster mural of, it's called Metal Masters, and it looks like something that would take a lifetime to draw. Well, how did that come about? Is that piece of art still around? It's so amazing.
I don't know where the artwork is. Steve paid to have that published because he was really into heavy metal. He was going to sell it at all the Battalion concerts. It appears once in a while on eBay and doesn't go for that much.
Wow.
He thought that would go to like like let's say a Van Halen concert and have this guy stand out there trying to sell those posters. I don't even know if they sold any or not.
Yeah.
And also, I wondered what happened to all that New York City Outlaw artwork. Like Bob has a few pages, so I definitely had it. I must have sold it at all the comic shows I was going to, or maybe dealers bought it.
Yeah,
because I ended up with only one drawing finally of from issue number 2. It was that last panel where the guy's hung or something.
Yes, it's great.
That was the last page I sold years ago, and then I only had some of the color guides. So all that artwork, it must have disappeared along the way, or was traded for videos or something, you know, because I wanted videos at the time. They were hard to get.
Yeah.
So I knew collectors that were willing to, I'll give you the page of artwork, give me like 10 videos.
Wow.
You know, I did a lot of that. I was also a big video collector at one time, and thousands of all that sleazy junk from the 70s and 60s.
Oh, really? Like what kind of stuff?
all sorts of stuff. I like um, Jesse Frankel.
Yeah.
That job from
Oh yes. Yeah. I used to be into his work.
that guy that used to turn into the werewolf from Spain too. I forget his name. I don't know if he was kind of muscular. He did like all these werewolf fighting yetis and different things. And I liked all the Italian directors. Like I loved all those Hercules movies. I ended up with like 250 of those Hercules movies, and also around maybe 150 of their spy imitation movies.
When were you collecting these? Like
in the 70s.
Well, wow. Yeah.
Maybe 80s, because when the VCR came out. So I still have a lot of them. I threw out the VHS tapes. I kept the copies of the DVDs that I had made.
Right.
Fan made. Had fans doing stuff for me. I'd say, well, here's a drawing of your favorite character. Here's like 50 VHS tapes. Can you turn them into DVDs for me? So they would do that gladly.
Oh, wow. Would you ever like pause it to like get a reference from?
Not really. I would pause it just to see like how something worked. Like now you can actually, like Neil Adams was a standout because of his realism. If he would have had all that at his hands at the time instead of some photographs that he found, he would have been turning that stuff out a lot faster. He actually drew the body as realistic as anybody could draw it. Even though somebody like Gil Kane would draw it more mechanical, he knew all the anatomy also.
Yeah. Did you collect other artists' work at all?
Yes, I did, but it was sold off eventually for house payments or staying alive or whatever. I had Wally Wood pages.
Wow.
I had Joe Kubert pages. I sold for decent money though. I used to know ALK art dealers. They would say, "Well, I'll give you $500 for that Kubert page." Of course, it would be like $25,000 though.
Yeah.
But there's no way of doing that.
It seemed like you really like, tracked down like your favorite like artists. Like, did you ever try to track down Kirby?
No, because there were two guys that I never spoke to because they were like gods. I did not talk to Jack Kirby, I saw him at the conventions. I figured everybody was going to bother him. I didn't bother. And Vern Hogarth showed up. And I didn't want to show him my artwork because the guy was like a genius. You know what I mean? I knew everybody else, so let's put it that way. People were afraid to see Neil Adams. I wasn't. He tore the hell out of me too, by the way, just like he did everybody.
That's great.
I it's back to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and forget about being an artist. But I came back like months later, and he says, "Wow, you came back. You dared to come back." And he says, "Wow, you improved." And he said, "You can go in that room there, and for 5 cents, you can make photocopies in either pencils or inks or anything."
Yeah.
And then I hired him. He inked the cover of and colored Starfighters #1 and #2, and then he also did Rock Comics with me, the cover.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
those are so good. Like when I like how like much you appreciate these guys being like hard on you. Like, do you do the same when you're teaching?
Yes, because I got yelled at one time because I told the kids, "Don't even listen to what your parents say." And the parent called me out and was saying, "Why did you tell my kid that?" That was good advice.
It was.
Going to be anything. See, so he says, I'll speed this up. She said, "I wanted to be a dancer at one time, and I did it for a while, and then I had to get a job, and I had the kids and everything." So I didn't even know what to say to this guy. Because I used to tell the kids, one kid actually two kids dropped out of school after I talked to him, and one of them made it as an artist.
Oh, wow.
So there was that kind of thing. Like, actually, you shouldn't even give anybody advice anymore because it doesn't apply in this new world. I don't know how it does. Mm-hmm. You might have been the last one of those guys that's going to come through the hard knocks combat.
I know of, it's funny, like when I would post things about New York City Outlaws, I got hit up by someone who was a student of yours, Michael Turney. I don't know if you remember.
This Ninja Turtle movie.
Yeah, he played Danny in the 1990 Ninja Turtles movie. And I think he even sent me a picture from back in the day of like your class or like where you were like teaching. But he was like so fond of that time period, and he spoke so highly of you. I thought that was really cool.
There's a lot of kids like that. I must have taught thousands of students. I would give you a career thing really quick.
Yeah.
Every learning center that was a place where singles could meet each other. I was teaching there every week, 2 times a week. I was teaching at Parsons 3 times a week, the major art school. I was teaching anatomy and comic book drawing, and then I started the Saturday class. I can't work at these places anymore because everybody passed on, so I have no connections anymore. Also, what I'm doing now is I put up a series on how to draw on YouTube. You should look that up.
I have, yeah, it's really
Yeah, I
great.
do that to sell books because I've sold like maybe 100 books in the last month, so I was proud of that.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome that you like, are passing down like the knowledge that like you've learned. I think that's really important.
Yes, it is, because guess what? When one of those guys dies, it all dies. When
Yeah.
Eric Clapton dies, that's all gone unless you can decipher his records. Gil Kane is gone. I have all his notes. I must have 2,000 of his layouts. Marvel recently called me to publish a book. I don't know if I'm going to do it.
Wow.
Layouts. I might do it though because I've been selling copies of the layouts on eBay. So we'll see what happens with that.
That's cool. Like, yeah, all I want to do in my life and my career is to like have my work like live on, like past me, and like that's what I, is really special about this release of these comics and your work, getting republished. Like it's living on, and it will continue to live on, for decades and generations to come.
Well, that's cool, right?
Yeah, it's like I think that's the coolest thing an artist could have happen. It's going to be amazing to see this get reintroduced to people today, and you could just feel the energy coming off the page. People are going to be inspired by it. It's so cool that what Floating World and Power Comics is doing, and I hope they continue to do it and we get some more of your work re-released.
That'd be good. In fact, Populous 5000 came out too. That was really cool. I see made that look, and the guy that did the coloring on the cover on it was brilliant.
Oh, it looks so great. It almost like reminded me of New York City Outlaws. Just the characters on it were like almost like Thunderclap Jones, or had that vibe to it.
And he has a new cover on that too, so that was great. So I got paid.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't lose anything. It's still like my style.
Yeah, and you're still going. You're still making work. Like, where can people find you and reach out to you?
You can go on YouTube and contact me through their direct message. I'm also on Facebook. I've made comments on some of the past artists.
Yeah,
sometimes I get work from that. And then eBay, and then I'm going to go back on Heritage again too at some point.
Great. Thank you so much, Ken, and hopefully we'll talk in the future. And also, the way I'm introduced into this story is that like I wanted to turn New York City Outlaws into a movie, and we've tried for many years to make it happen. But we still never have given up hope on it. Maybe I have to make a few more movies to make it happen someday, but I hope we get to have that adventure at some point in our lives. I think it'd be awesome.
I do too, and I think the release of that book might help.
That would be awesome. Oh, it'd be so fun. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ken, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.